Hi, Shannon here from houseimprovements.com. Today I'm going to show you how to properly install a suspended ceiling system. Sometimes these are called a drop ceiling. You typically will see them in a basement. So you've got a metal grid system. As you can see up above, we've got this room partially done. So you've got a metal grid system suspended from the ceiling above, and then these drop-in tiles, and in this case we're using 2 foot by 2 foot tile, and you've got a wall angle which is metal along the wall as well. What we're going to do today is show you exactly right from start to finish how to do it, and one of the things I'd like to just briefly touch on is that you need to get a level mark all the way around the top of your room. That'll give you the height of your ceiling. So first of all, to determine that, you need to know a little bit about what you're going to use for lighting, what obstructions you might have in the existing ceiling that you need to work around. Bare minimum, you're going to need a couple inches between the top of the ceiling grid and whatever the obstruction is. But if you're using something like pot lights or that sort of light, which looks like this, so typical pot light type install for renovation. You need to make sure you have enough height. Your tile is going to be here. You're going to need enough height for this box above your tile. So it takes a little bit of planning to figure out exactly where all this stuff's going to fit in, that nothing's going to be in the way. So once you've determined your height, you can then, like I said, you could use a laser level like this, which is a rotary level. This shoots a level line around the room once you're set up. You can use a target like this, which detects that level line. Like in this case, I can't set this up high enough to get right up to the height of the ceiling, so what I would do is set it up level at whatever various height. I use the target, and then you'd use a stick or whatever in the back of it, set it to the height you want, and go around and mark the room off. Most people aren't going to, as a DIYer, have this type of setup available to them. So in that case, then really a 4 foot level is going to do the job. Takes a little more time maybe, and maybe not 100% accurate, but most cases you're going to get it really close. So in the demonstration we're going to do today, I'm going to use the 4 foot level just to show you how it's done. We've partially got some of the room already marked out. So I've got a couple walls left to do, so I'll finish those off. And then we'll go into actually mounting the wall angle, which would be the first step after that. Okay. So like I said, we have the room partially marked out already, so I've come around a few of the walls, and you can see my line here. So I'm going to continue this on around the corner. So I simply just need to, if you'll notice that I'm working above my line with my level, because the level may leave a bit of a mark on the wall if you move it around. The wall's already painted. So I'm trying to work above my line. If you wanted, you could put some masking tape on the edge of your level, and then if you had to work down here, it wouldn't leave a mark. But so I'm just lining up with the previous mark I had at the corner, and get myself level here. Hold it nice and tight. And just go around like that, and I'm just going to simply continue right around, doing the same thing all the way around the room. Pretty simple, just takes a little bit longer because you're moving a few times with the level. Okay, so we've gone around, leveled that line all the way around there. After that, I'm going to use a stud finder, and I'm going to go around and mark where the studs are above that line, just above it, so I can see. You want to try to screw right into the studs if at all possible to make this nice and secure. And what goes up just under that line is the wall angle. So it's a right angle piece of metal usually white unless you're getting it custom colored. So if our line is on the wall up here, like you can see, the line is going to go to the top edge. That's our guide. I like to mark it at the top, not at the bottom, because at the bottom you're going to see that line afterwards unless you're going to try to paint and cover it up, which is a pain. So you might as well mark it to the top. Then you don't have to worry if it's showing a bit. It's all hidden once the ceiling's done. Something to watch for on all the different materials, the metal materials, is for imperfections. The odd time you'll get scuff marks on the paint, so try to work around that. In this case, I've got scuff marks on one side but not the other, so I can always put that against the wall. Nobody ever sees it. As long as the bottom edge looks good, that's what we need to do. This stuff is easy to cut. You mark it with your tape and pencil, and just simply a pair of tin snips cuts right through this stuff whenever you've got to make a cut. So we're going to show you how to put this up, because that's your next step, and then from there we're going to go into getting up the main grid system for the ceilings. So we're on an outside corner here. The lip of this product, of this particular one, is 7/8 of an inch from inside corner to outside corner. So that means when I measure this piece, I've actually got to be 7/8 of an inch longer because we're on an outside corner. So I had already measured this one. I need to be 43 3/4. So I'm going to cut from a length. I'm going to cut that to length and get it all set up. So like I said, just simply measure it out. Put a little pencil mark. 43 3/4. I almost cut it too short. It's a little nicer to have something set up to work off of with this stuff. We just don't have the room right here. Okay, so that's our piece that would go up on the wall. But now, if it's up on the wall on an outside corner, the corner of the drywall's back here, so I need to slit this little piece so it'll fold back out of the way. So I'm just going to go right on the back edge and cut right on the corner there, just a little further than 7/8 of an inch back. Just it'll bend a little bit from the snip, so just kind of straighten it out a little bit, and that piece is ready to put up on the wall. So I'll go back over here. And I forgot I've got to mark my studs. I'm just going to quickly do that. If I can get one. There we go. Okay, so there's my studs there. Bring my piece back up, and remember that pencil line I leveled up, we're going to put to the top edge. I'm just using 1 1/4 coarse threaded drywall screws. They work pretty good for this. And on my inside corner, the last piece I left just slightly short, so I can slide this right behind. If this piece was real tight to the corner, I would just simply set this one on top. It doesn't really matter. You just overlap the corners there. So get it all lined up. Be careful when you're screwing this on. You don't over tighten the screws. You may notice if there happens to be a nail or a screw in the drywall right in the same area, if you tighten this too much and it sucks the drywall back, you may pop those screws. So just try it. You need it snug, but it doesn't have to be sunk right tight. Okay, and you can see I'm sticking by there. After I get the next piece up, I'll fold that little tab back that I made on the end there. So our next piece is going to go along there, and again it has to be that 7/8 of an inch, in this case longer. So I had pre-measured it out to be 34 inches. So cut my piece. Again, I just about cut it too short. Okay, so this piece is going to go up in this direction. So now I need to make a cut over on this corner again. So I'm going to make sure I come back at least 7/8 of an inch. And I'm going to cut that the back piece against the drywall right out on this one. Okay, so I make a cut down vertically, then I'm going to flip it and make a cut right along that back corner, like so. So we've got that notched right out like that. Now the other thing, just to make it look a little nicer, is I'm going to actually cut this on a 45-degree angle, so that when I put it up there, it'll look like it'll look similar to being a mitered corner. So I'm just going to simply, I'm not actually marking out 45 degrees, taking a guesstimate on it. So you end up with that right there as that's what you would see from the bottom. And it's going to sit underneath the piece we've already got up there. So it's basically going to look like that from the bottom side. So it just looks a little neater. So I can install that up there now. Again, I really got to mark these studs all out. You get the idea of this though. This is just so that we know where the studs are. So I've got one in the middle and I'll have one at each end. If anything, you want to be just a hair long. You can always trim it off if it's not quite right. This one's perfect, actually. Actually, the one on the other wall is maybe just a hair. Oh, shoot, be careful you don't do that either. Stab into the wall with the end of the metal. This one's just a hair long. I'm just going to snip it off. Like so. Line that all up just like that. Okay, sometimes you just got to do a little bit of tweaking to get this corner just to sit right. And this tab, like I said before, we're just going to bend it right back like that around the corner. It's out of the way so that it's not sticking out when we do the tiles. So I'm just going to keep continuing right around, finish this room off with the wall channel, wall angle I should say. One problem that you could come across, especially on an existing wall, is you could end up with a bit of a gap between the wall and the channel. You know, there might be a hump in the drywall or something like that. We had that situation right over here by this window, so I just want to show that. If you looked along there, you can see, you know, we're pretty tight all the way along the wall, and then all of a sudden we get this space right here. That's because there seems to be a bit of a buildup of drywall right around the window, on the corner of the window here. So, you know, the metal being bent in a right angle isn't real flexible, so you can't really force it too much back. But then again, it meets up nice at the corner. So you can see we've got this bit of a space here. I've had to stick a shim in behind it and still screwed it in place. And I'll have to come back after and use a paintable caulking in there. It's about the only way to really hide that. If you try to force this channel back, it's just going to bend and warp and look like crud. I guess the only other alternative is you could cut it here, actually put a joint here, so the wall angle would come across and then actually slope back on an angle. It won't completely hide that either, so about the only thing I can do there is caulk that and paint it in with white, just so it kind of blends away. It ends up being in a bit of a shadow line, so it won't be real noticeable, but it is when there's a big gap there. Now, like I said, I'm just going to go along and finish all this. You've seen an outside corner. You've seen what I did here at this inside corner where it's overlapped. The only thing I didn't show you is, you know, if you got a long stretch or whatever of a wall and you're butting two channels together, just butt them right together end to end. They line up nice. The type of tile we're using today, you probably could overlap them slightly, just set one on the other, say 1/4 of an inch, but I just like to always do mine with a butt joint. So just butt straight in, screw it all up, and it looks good and tight. So I'm going to finish this off, and then we're going to get on to the next item. Okay, so we've got our wall angle all up all the way around the room. You know, really before you even get to this point, you should really make up a bit of a diagram of your room with some accurate measurements and draw out your grid as far as what components you're going to need. This will help you in laying it out so it looks even in the room, and plus give you an easy way to count up how many pieces of each thing you need. If you go to the website, there's actually a whole article on planning the layout for suspended ceiling. But basically the gist of it is, and I would check the article out still too, but the basic gist of it is, you know, if you've got a room, let's say it's 8 by 10 or whatever you're doing, you want to center everything up so that your border panels are equal on, you know, these two ends are equal to each other and those two ends are equal to each other. Just looks better. You know, you don't want to start out with a full tile here and just, you know, maybe it ends up with a 3-inch strip of tile on the far wall. Just looks kind of amateurish. So try to balance them out, figure it all out, do the math, and get everything balanced so you got pretty equal border tiles if you can. It's nice not to have a, you know, say a 6-inch strip of tile if you can, anything smaller than that. I mean, obviously there's going to be times where maybe, you know, there's a protrusion in the room or something and it's just going to end up being whatever it is, but preferably not that on your border. You know, if it ends up being 6 inches or less, take one of your tile spaces out and split it in half and add that to the edges. So you know, you might end up with 1'6" border instead of 6-inch border. So yeah, just plan it out, get that all prepared. Our next step in our project that we've got going here is to put up the main grid, the main tees. So these main tees are the heavier structure of all the parts that you have, and this is just a piece of them. They come in, you know, 8 and 12-foot lengths, but this is just a cut-off piece. So, I mean, it's a T because of the shape of it. No big surprise there. It's pretty heavy duty for strength, you know, laterally up and down, so that it doesn't bend or anything. It still needs to be supported by anchors in the ceiling, though. So about every 2 to 3 feet, you'll want to screw into a ceiling joist with one of these screws. You can actually get a special bit for in your cordless drill that puts these in there, and it just drives them into the ceiling joists above you. Another thing to make sure is if you know, in this case our floor joists or our ceiling joists above us are going this way, we want our main tees going perpendicular to that, and that just makes it easier to put in your hooks and make sure you've got support everywhere. Otherwise, if you ran your main tees the same direction as the joists, you're probably going to have to add in a bunch of blocking everywhere that you want on one of these, because it's very unlikely you're going to hit right below one of those ceiling joists. So again, space the anchors out no more than 3 feet apart, I would say, on most applications. And so once you've figured out where your main tees are going to be, you can snap a line across the ceiling joists from end to end of the room and screw your anchors in there. Just want to talk about the main tees a little bit. You're first of all, when you've got your length of your tee, this would be one of the factory ends here, you know, and you know what your end needs to be for your first 2-foot tee or 4-foot tee that's going to go in here, your first member. So say your border is going to be 1'6". Most times you're not going to be able just to set this up there and it works out. You're going to have to measure back, cut off the factory end, at least at one end, and so that you get your grid all working out at the right intervals. And then if the piece of main tee is too short for the room, you're going to have to cut another piece, obviously, that hooks into the end. And they're basically made to fit together. These tabs all fit together, and it locks right into place like this, and you'll hear that snap, and that holds it together, keeps it flush on the bottom, and holds the two pieces from coming apart. So sometimes, you know, even say you have a 12-foot tee and your room is, I don't know, 11'6" or something like that. You may have to cut more off this end, which actually makes your whole length a little short. Okay, but the piece that you cut off to get started should snap on the other end and be able to be cut off again. So, you know, in that case, one would work for that. That's very confusing what I just said, but you'll see once you get working with this stuff. So the important thing is, don't just slap your mains up against that one side of the room and start working. Plan it out. Measure these little slotted tabs, because this is where all your other components fit into. And plan it out, measure it out properly. Measure 2 or 3 times, make sure you're right. So what I'm going to do, our first main tee in this room ends up right above my head here. And so I'm going to measure this, and I'm going to go to the other room and cut this piece to the right end. Now, in this particular room, because this room isn't solely on its own, we've come from another room and it all ends up hooking together. So I end up, I think it's 5 3/4 against this wall before I have my first intersecting tee. So I've got to go and cut the first end off so that 5 3/4 works out, then measure my total length and cut the other end off wherever it actually ends up. So I'm going to go to the other room and get that all cut. Actually, in fact, I'll probably bring it in here so you can kind of see what I'm doing and get it all cut. Okay, so I've brought a length of the main piece of grid into the room here, and you're gonna see as I start putting all this stuff up a little better. It may have been a little confusing what I just described to you as far as balancing it out, but you're going to see it a little easier once the pieces start going up. So by my plan, I know that I've got to come back. This is my starting edge. I've got to come back 5 3/8. So I'm going to put a mark there, and I need to cut this first end off of my main here. So you want to cut your bottoms on the painted part straight across. You kind of have to snip from each side. But then on this piece, on this vertical piece, you want to angle it back. This would be the wall. When this sits up on the wall angle, here's the drywall wall here, and this is the room. So you want to angle this back so that it isn't binding on the wall or anything. So you just kind of eyeball it up. Put, I don't know, 10-15 degree angle on it. Doesn't really matter as long as you've got it cut back a bit. Give this a few wiggles, and that piece just breaks off, and you get a nice angle here that won't interfere with anything when you put it up. And a little bit of extension, and the flat part there. So I've got this piece here. God, I wish I had my sawhorses here today. Kind of set it there. This was 88 and 5/8, I believe. So I'm going to hook on the end that I just cut off, because I want to cut my whole piece to length. Marking 88 and 5/8. I'm just going to double check that actually up top here just to be sure. Wall to wall. Yeah, it's 88 and 5/8 tight, so I'm going to just make it 1/8 of an inch less than that, just so there's a little bit of adjustment room there. So I'll just come back from my mark a little bit. Straight cuts, my angle cut, like that. Get that to break off. Okay, so I've got my my first main tee cut there. Something that's a good idea too, just have a damp rag with you. You get, it doesn't take very much, especially with this all being white. You get fingerprints on things just from dust on your hands and that, so try to keep your hands clean all the time if you can. When we cut there, we had marked our line straight across on the ceiling here for these anchors. So I'm just going to mount these in here right now before we get the main up in the way. So I'm going to come in a couple feet from the first end and put that in there, and go over about 3 feet and put my next one in right here. Just like so. So in this span, those two will be just fine. And you're going to have a piece of wire that basically hooks in that eyelet of the hook and hangs down and hooks into one of the holes in the top of that grid. So I'm just going to pre-bend a couple just so they're hanging up here. I'll show you how to attach those after to everything. I've got that hanging there. You just want to be careful when they're hanging there. If you get up on your step, you don't jam that into the top of your head, because that's going to hurt. So this is my starting wall on this side, so I need to flip this around so that I end up with my spacing working out the right direction. I'm watching out that I don't poke my head. Just getting this sitting up there. Now on a longer length, they aren't going to sit up there that nicely. They're going to want to flop around or fall over on you or whatever, so you're more than likely going to have to hook one of these wires in, if nothing else, at least temporarily. So I've got it hooked up in there, and I will bend that more, but you'll see why I left it for now. And I want to hook in one of these holes that are all along the top with the other end of the wire. So I'm taking a bit of a guesstimate. If this was a long length, you're going to get some sag in there. You'll want to pull a string line across the bottom, nice and tight from wall to wall, so that you can make sure that this is hanging straight up and down. This is a short enough length that there won't be very much sag in it at all. So I get my wire started in there. And you can see I bent the top one there right now, but I'm actually a little bit, the wire's a little bit too short. You can see my T's up off my wall angle there. So I'm going to just readjust my bend. This takes a little bit of fiddling around. You want to make sure you use a heavy enough wire that's going to support the weight. You know, there's a lot of weight in these ceilings once you get all the tile and everything in. Okay, so I've got it up there. And for right now, I'm just going to do a nice simple J-bend on there. After I know I have everything the right height and everything, I'll twist these around the main wire so that they can't slip off or anything. I'm floating just a little bit there again, but we can readjust that once we get going. So that'll be enough just to hold that one from falling over. I've got 2 more mains in this room to do, so we're going to cut away from the video. I'll get those 2 mains up, and when we come back, we'll be ready to start putting some of the interlocking cross pieces in, the 2 4-foot tees and 2-foot tees, and you'll start to see how this all comes together. Okay, so the next 2 components we're going to put in is the 4-foot cross tees. Our mains are 4 feet apart, so this piece is going to go from main to main, and then because we're using 2-foot tiles, we need to divide that space in half again, so the 2-footers are going to go in like this. So all this stuff snaps together, and it, like I said before, it goes into the elongated slots on there. They all have little clips on here, and if you have a real good look at that, you can see right here there's a, maybe you can't, you can see there's a little bit of an edge right there, a little clip. So you need those when 2 pieces go together like that. If the main was in between, they're going to be like this, so those clips go to the outside every time, and you'll hear them actually click right in. So basically, I'm going to start out by sticking a 4-footer in here in the right spot, which was 5 1/4 inches from the wall on this wall. You can hear that all snap together like that. And this will start to true everything up. So our next 4-foot one is going to go in 2 feet away from the last one we did, which is 4 of those slots. Just measure your slots, but they're, oh shoot, that's not the right piece. Usually those elongated slots are 6 inches apart, so I've never seen them any different than that. So we're going to move over 4 slots. We're going to click one end in. Now I've got to get this 2-foot tee in here. It's easier to do before I have everything completely together. So I snapped it into that one, snapped it into this one. Now I just need to clip in the 4-foot tee down at that end. So you can start to see how all this comes together. So I grab another 4-foot tee and another 2-footer. I go over my 4 slots. And get everything snapped together. Okay, so you can see already we've created 4 full 2-foot by 2-foot tile spaces. We will have to cut a 2-foot tee off to fit in here. So we'll measure it and cut that in to fit. Everywhere on your borders you'll have to do that. You'll have to cut some in all the way around there. I'm going to go ahead and fill in a few more of the full ones here, and then I'll cut a couple of these just to get ourselves straightened up. And then we're just about ready to start dropping some tiles in. I can show you how to. These ones obviously are easy, right? They're just, the tile just drops in. I guess the only exception is if you have pot lights, so you'll have to cut a hole for the pot light, heat ducts, that sort of thing. So we jumped away for a few minutes and we've got all the majority of the grid all up, all the main parts that don't need to be cut in around the border. So you can see we've got lots of nice little squares all over the place. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to where our mains were. Those were the very first pieces we put in after the wall angle. And remember, they hang from the wire. So basically we have to get those straight from one wall to the other. We need to make sure they're straight and level. So to do that, I've attached a string line, and I'll just pull it down here so you can see. So we've ran a string line under this piece, which is one of the mains. We've attached it with some small clamps at each end. And I spent probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes adjusting the wire lengths on those hangers to get this piece of grid up and down and sitting level so that it's nice and straight, or nice and level I should say. So now the next thing to do is just to go back up there, twist those wires that I had. Just give them a bit of a twist so that they can't slip loose or anything. So I'm going to twist that one up, and I'm going to bring this one, try to get around there a couple times just like that. So you can see you get a little bit of movement still in the grid, but once we get the tiles in, that kind of stiffens everything up. So I'm just going to do that, 2 more spots. Well, I do it on every grid. I'm just going to show you on this one. So like I said, I've already spent the time getting this level. It's just a matter of tightening up all the wires, getting everything in there. And the string line is kind of the quickest, easiest way, I think, to determine that level line there. You could use your laser level or whatever, your spirit level, but we already know that our outside wall angle is at the level, so if we pull a string from one to the other, we should be at a level mark. So there, we've got that one. I'll do the same on the other 2, which are one's over there and one's over here. And then we know our ceiling's all nice and straight and level. After that point, I'm going to drop a few of the main uncut tiles in just to help rigid things up and pull it into square a little bit, just in case we're still out a bit. And then from there we're going to cut in all the little short pieces, like over along that wall, right from the wall over to the next main grid. So that'll be next. Okay, so we're just going to talk about the tiles that I'm using here for a minute. So they come in a big carton. They're 2 foot by 2 foot basically, and they have a recessed edge along the outside. You can kind of see there how it comes up. So, I mean, obviously the tile sits like this in the ceiling. So that recess allows it to, once you put it in there, I'll just pop one in. It sits down and actually hangs down, kind of shadows the track a little bit. Just a nice little architectural detail. I don't know, the tiles are around $7 a piece or something like that. But they are a nice tile, and they're nice rigid tile too. So anyways, I'm going to pop in some full-sized ones just to kind of squares up the grid a little bit. Something also I didn't mention yet, what I've done is just taken measured a diagonal in one of these squares, like from here to here and then here to here, or in bigger sizes, doesn't matter, but as long as you're going corner to corner. And if your system's pretty square, that measurement should be equal, or within a 1/16 or something like that. So I checked that in a few spots. We're right now sitting right around a 1/16 within square. So by dropping in a few tiles, that'll just shift things around a little bit and almost square it completely up. So I'm going to drop a few of those in. If you've got spots where there was going to be pot lights, you can take a hole saw in your drill or whatever, the appropriate size for the lights you're using. You can drill your hole right through the tile. That's the nicest way to do it. It's a nice clean cut then. You can mark the spot with the template, whatever size, and then cut it with your knife. You kind of got to saw it a little bit, or maybe even use a drywall saw. You just have to be careful. Sometimes the white surface on there will flake when you're using a saw. So you just got to be careful it doesn't flake too far, that the trim ring on whatever you're putting on isn't going to cover it. Same thing with heating vents. If you're using round ones, those round adjustable ones, you can cut it out with a hole saw. So that's about the easiest way to do those. Right now, this room, the electrician's just got the wiring brought to the room. He hasn't actually looped from pot light to pot light yet, so I don't want to get too many tiles in the way, because he's going to have to just move them out anyways again to run his wires. So I just want to put half a dozen or so in here, and then once we get that in there, I'm going to go around the outside and cut in all of these T's that are missing still, that go over to the wall, just to finish things off. And then I will show you how to cut the tiles themselves and cut the recess, because when we cut the tile in size, we're going to end up cutting that recess off of one or two sides. So you have to cut the recess in that side so that it drops down at the wall again. So I'm just going to quickly throw a few tiles in. One thing's with these, they have a bit of a granular surface to them, and some of those granulars come off, so you end up with the odd little bit in your eyes now and again, so you just got to kind of be aware of that when you're lifting them over your head. You can maybe even see in the camera the few little bits of sand or whatever it is dropping out of there. So they just fall right down in there like that. If you just go in on a little bit of an angle, if there's not too many obstructions in your way, it should just fit in. That's another thing to remember. If you get the ceiling grid too tight, like I said earlier in the video, to any obstructions or the floor joists, you have a heck of a time getting these tiles in, especially if you're using 2 foot by 4 foot tiles. So I recommend, like I said, maybe 4 inches, kind of tightest to the bottom of the floor joist or any major obstructions. If you just got the odd pipe or something hanging down, you can usually work around that. But you do definitely need a little bit of room to maneuver these into place. The 2x2s are a little better, a little easier. Okay, so you can see they're just dropping in there pretty nice and easy. I'm not really going to any particular random or any particular pattern here. I'm just trying to get a few in throughout the area. Like I said, just to kind of square things up a bit. Okay, so we got a few in there. I'll maybe throw one in over here. Again, try to keep your hands clean because you're going to see fingerprints on this stuff. Okay, so we got a few in just to kind of make sure things are sitting square, and I'm going to grab some 2 foot tees, will be long enough. I'll grab some of them and make some measurements here and cut those to insert them. Okay, so now to cut the outer border tees, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my tape measure right up on top of this wall channel, right tight to it, and measure over to this edge, the outer edge of the tee we're going to, and add 1/8 of an inch. The reason for that is that when these tees go on there, this little bend that you see there, that 1/8 inch there sits up on top of the one, so we need to allow for that. It's just easier to hook on there to measure it. So what I'm going to do is measure this one here. So I'm right over tight, I'm measuring tight to here, and I've got, it actually measures 13 and 11/16, so I'm going to make it 13 and 13/16. So the reason I add that little bit on there is because I'm going to actually hook my tape right on that end that is actually overlapping. So I will just do that right here where it's easier. So 13 and 13/16 in my case. And you cut these really the same as all the other T-type members. You're going to make a cut from each side on the bottom colored face. And I'm going to make an angled, this is the end that we're wanting to keep. So I'm going to angle that end back. I'll just switch hands here so I don't drop it. I'm going to angle that end back a little bit like that. Wiggle that so it breaks off, and there's our piece that's going to snap in there. Okay, so we've got our end that fits into the elongated hole. And you hear it clip in there and sit right down on the track. Now, I mean, it's going to move around like that until we get tiles in. So you just roughly get it close in place. So I've just got to cut 3 more for this side, and I'll have those all done. Okay, we've got all the tees cut in around the border. We've moved over to the other side of the room. Just there's a little better angle here to shoot this part. So you can see we've got, again, we're going to have a cut tile in this whole row. So to measure this tile, it's very similar to how I was measuring the tees. I want to put my tape right in here. So I'm right in there. I'm measuring over to this edge. And here I've got 13 1/4. And I'm going to take 1/8 of an inch off this time, just to give a little bit of room to have a little bit of play to get it in there. So now when it comes to marking that on the tile, so I'm going to be cutting at 13 1/8. I don't want to hook on the outside edge in this case with this type of tile. I don't want to hook on the outside edge. I'm going to hook on this ridge, and I'm just going to put a little mark with my knife. Do the same thing over here. And I'll use a straight edge. I'm just using an ordinary snap blade type knife, utility knife. You will go through a few blades. This stuff dulls the blades pretty good, but so I just lined up my straight edge on those marks. I'll make a few cuts. A little easier if you have a tabletop to work on. I'm just kind of improvising on the garbage can there. But you know, usually 3 passes or so and the tile cuts pretty cleanly. So now, again, a little more work with the recess tile. We've got it cut. We're going to set it up in there. Oops. And I'm putting my cut side that I just cut off against the wall. Dropping the tile. There's some of that stuff in my eye. Drop the tile in there so it's sitting in place. And I'm not sure, hopefully you can see where the recess has dropped down here. You can see that edge, but back here it hasn't because it's sitting up on that outer trim wall angle. So to mark that, because we're going to have to cut that out, I'm holding with my one hand, just holding the tile down, and I'm just running my blade right along that wall angle, just to leave a little score mark on the tile. I'm going to pull the tile out, go back down here to my makeshift workbench, and I need to make a couple scores along that line. Your knife follows that line pretty nicely once you've got it there. I'm not trying to cut through the tile, I'm just trying to cut about as deep as the recess. So I'm not pushing real hard, just pushing as hard as I need to get down to that level. Then I need to make a cut all the way along here to form this. Basically I'm trying to get a lip just like the other edges have. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it there, around 3/16 of an inch or so down. I pull that piece out. So now we've got that groove all the way around the tile again. And this pertains to any piece you have to cut. You can easily do this no matter what the shape is. So now this piece, when we take it back up there and pop it in, the whole thing will sit down like it should. You can see we're hanging down there all the way around, just like it should. So we'd have to do that on every outside tile or any tile that's cut around something like that. So like I said, it is a little more work, but they're just such a nice tile. It gives it a really professional look. So I'd have to do this around the whole room, including, you know, this would be an example of kind of an L-shaped tile. So the tile is actually, you know, there's a little arm on it here, and then the main part of the tile there. So same idea, just take all your measurements, cut your tile down on the ground, pop it in there, trace out around your wall angle, pop it out again, you know, chisel that area out of there so that it recesses, and the tile should fit good every time. Yeah, so those are the basic areas that you're always going to have to do that with this style of tile. If you just have a flat tile, obviously it just plunks in there, and there's no issues with having to recess it at all. Like I talked about before, for any round holes you have to cut, you know, some heat ducts or pot lights, that sort of thing. This is what I was talking about as far as a hole saw, a cup saw, whatever you want to call it. It just fits in the drill. You can buy them in different sizes, and it just makes a nice clean cut. Like I said, you could do it with your knife if you wanted to. So I think that's the gist of it. I do have an article on installing the same type of ceiling. So if you want to read that over, there might be some little hints in there that I forgot to mention today. We have the article as well on the website that describes how to figure out your layout and drawing it out and that sort of thing, because that is definitely the best thing to do might seem like a simple idea until you get going and you start to forget what you had planned out originally. So if you got it on paper, you can see and refer back to it every time you need to double check something. So I think we're good. I'm glad you're able to tune in and watch this video. I hope you found it helpful. We've got lots of other videos on our YouTube channel, and we've got articles and the forum at the website. So if you want to go and check all that stuff out, that'd be great. And leave a comment. Thanks a lot.